Will a health plan approve a biosimilar or not? How will they decide if there are 5 trastuzumab biosimilars approved in the US or 3 filgrastims? How do you decide? My guess is that particular health plans will just contract with different companies and that will be it. Or they'll say you can use any biosimilar and it won't really matter because they're all going to be about the same price point lower. So I don't know that there will be a key factor other than approval by a regulatory agency and a price difference.
At our hospital we have a commission for the use of pharmacological agents, which is led by a physician, and his deputy is the hospital pharmacist. And to get into the hospital from outside, as a manufacturer, you have to convince the physicians that this drug is good to use. And then certain areas like gastroenterologists or rheumatologists or oncologists can ask for example, for a biosimilar being put on the list, and then it's being discussed in this commission together with the pharmacists and the physicians what is plus and minus of using these drugs, and then it's being decided. Of course, it is not wanted that you have for the same compound 3 or 4 different drugs, and so it has to be decided. This is how it's being handled here. I know that, for example, in the practices outside of hospitals, these regulatory agencies on the national and especially regional level are part of this decision making, because they actually ask for a certain amount of usage of biosimilars.
Whether biosimilars will be a first-line, first-tier biologic or not is an interesting one. I think that if you've shown that an agent is similar and that there are no clinically meaningful differences, that we can consider that a first-tier biologic. It can be the first one you take off the shelf when you're treating your patient in early-stage disease. In fact, so much care is taken with the production and assessment of these agents that we can be very certain that they're safe and very certain about the clinical endpoints, at least the short-term clinical endpoints. So I think that we can feel secure in using these drugs in the, it's not like we're going to save them for the incurable patient. I think we can feel safe using the agents in patients who are being treated with curative intent. I'm speaking primarily about cancer, therapeutic agents, particularly trastuzumab, but there will be many others coming down the pike. And I think the rheumatologic area is sort of a separate one that we're not really involved with. But, we certainly have been embracing the supportive care drugs, and I don't think any of us have seen any appreciable differences there, as was shown in clinical trials as well. So I don't, people are always a little bit nervous about it, and it's going to take a while to percolate in. But with the cost savings and the availability, I think that it is a inevitable shift over time, and a very important one in our competitive atmosphere, because the cost savings overall can be translated into spending money on drug development and spending money on giving patients newer drugs that are not yet biosimilars, and the new immunotherapies. I mean, it's a fortune of cancer therapy at the moment. So by ratcheting down some, by moving on to the biosimilars, I think that we're really improving things.
To get access to biosimilars, it is important in Germany that the physician knows about it. I think if there is more experience in the usage of biosimilars, as for example in rheumatology, where it has been used longer, even longer than the antibodies than in oncology or hematology, I think this information needs to be spread.
Challenges for the payers are hard to know exactly, but I think some of it is going to be how they contract for these drugs. So are they going to say that for your insurance plan, if there's a biosimilar available, you're obliged to get the biosimilar? With the biosimilars, I think it's an intravenous drug, so you have to get approval. So we, as the providers, our offices send in approval. I want to get trastuzumab for my patient. So the insurer could come back and say, yes, you can use trastuzumab, but you need to use a biosimilar. But it's going to be a fascinating thing because you can't say, let's say that my institution contracts with one biosimilar, because we usually contract to get delivery of specific agents, right? So then we can't just give a different one because the company says, I want you to use company X's biosimilar. And why should they care whether they use company X or Z's biosimilar? That's the thing. They're not going to specifically contract with that company. So it's interesting. I mean, with so many people jumping into the biosimilar market, will the insurers just simply say, we will only pay for a biosimilar, but we don't care whose it is? Will the cost differentials be big? My guess is no. My guess the whole field will just have to see this big shift in price down. But there are a lot of interesting challenges ahead.
Substitution means that the pharmacist can distribute biosimilar or the reference product no matter what the physician has prescribed. Here it is important that there is contact between the physician and the pharmacist, and that if the physician does not want substitution, that it's not being performed. However, legislation is not yet clear-cut, and for example in the European Union, to my knowledge, it is rather a matter of the national institutions than of the EU or the EMA, and I think we will see in the next years how this is going to happen. Substitution is in other drugs outside biologics something which happens on the regular base. With biologics, I think it's a more complex issue, and I think what needs to be assured is that there is knowledge to the physician and the patients whether he or she receives what has been prescribed.